Welcome to another critically acclaimed and very highly anticipated episode of Tinker Tuesday, wherein we mess around with some bikes here in the shed, and today being a little bit different, wherein we take care of 3 very small minor projects, as opposed to the more normal format wherein we try and take care of something a little bit bigger. These little projects herein will be taken care of by these little tools right here. And the bikes that these tools will be working with are as follows. First things first, let's talk a little bit more about this thing that I showed in the last Q&A upload. This is my homemade star nut driver. It's made from an 18mm spark plug socket, a bolt, a nut, and a washer. It is made to emulate this thing. If you don't know what any of these things are for or what they do, let me explain. The head tube of your bike is where the steer tube runs through. It has 2 bearings here that need pressure on either side to be able to stay in the proper position. This is the area where people say it can't be too tight nor too loose. Too loose, it clunks around and ruins your bearings. Too tight, it doesn't move the handlebars or fork at all and also ruins your bearings. Either way, if you get it wrong, you're going to ruin your bearings. Now, the way that those bearings receive their preload between each other is by the bolt that goes through the star nut that is inserted in the steer tube of the fork. You need somewhere threaded for that bolt to be able to hold this all together. Now inside the steer tube is the star nut, and the star nut is this. It goes in the steer tube in the simplest, most archaic way possible. With a hammer. Now of course it's tempting to just try and line this up and hit this in, but don't do that. Also, it's tempting to want to just take your stem cap bolt and use it as something to drive it in as well, but don't do that either. The problem that you run into when you do that is that it doesn't go in straight and you end up with something like this. And when you try and put your stem cap on, the bolt doesn't line up right and nothing's working properly at all. This is something I was taught at the very early stages of my bike mechanic career, and on this bike, I still failed to follow that rule. Hence why I have to fix it now. When you use something that kind of mimics that Park Tools star nut driver, it gets inserted into here, and then this ridge here will actually self-center it. As you can see, very, very crooked. Not particularly proud of showing this. Solved. Also, if you're gonna hit a socket with a hammer, make sure it's like a rubber mallet of sorts. Don't hit brittle hammers on brittle pieces like this. Boom, done, problem solved. Now, there was a time, not long ago, but relatively foreign to me, that headsets weren't quite as easy to install without the proper tools as they are now. For example, with our budget challenged gravel bike build, it uses a pressed-in headset cup. Now, old school headset cups would have had loose ball bearings, but I decided I wanted to go with the sealed bearing option. Mostly so any follow-up headset maintenance would be just as easy as an integrated headset after pressing the cups in. Another very attractive bonus of going with a sealed headset bearing is the ease of installing your headset bearing race. No longer are these hammered and pressed on with long tubes. This just needs to be placed onto the fork crown of your bike, and it's done. If you find yourself shopping for a headset, have a look at Brand X. Very reasonably priced, and I know for a fact that it comes with a headset bearing race like this, as opposed to one like this, where the loose ball bearings definitely have a spot where they need to be, and you don't want to ruin that. With this, there's nothing to ruin. Now, I tend to not advise that anyone really try and do anything with pressed headsets without the proper tools, but it'd be wildly hypocritical for me to, condemn you from doing it, because I've installed an embarrassing amount of pressed headsets with threaded rod and big washers. One thing is for sure though, one race at a time. Now a lot of people have called out for this thing to get painted. Do know that is the plan. It just is not going to be painted by me. I'm a fairly careless painter. I'm not picky enough. I'm not particularly good at it either, so Nick's gonna paint it. I'm just getting it together. There's an update coming up on this bike. I just wanted to press this headset in now, purely for content in this video today. Definitely don't read into those wheels or tires too much. Also, maybe not the fork, because possibly the steer tube is just like... Now, last but not least involves these, and this. I don't know that I've ever like fully made it clear my somewhat unvocalized frustration with all of the different styles of bottom bracket tools, but it's very frustrating. Trying to keep that from moving a little bit. I'm actually not particularly happy with the cleanliness of these threads, so I just want to take a minute here to like clean them out with a proper brush instead of just kind of like wiping it with a rag. Rags are great for like getting some of the thicker stuff off, but actually getting some stuff and crud out of threads, that's a brush's job. Now, when it comes to threaded bottom brackets, I've always been of the party that grease is best. But as of recently, for some reason I've been wanting to try anti-seize, and based on the minuscule amount of research that I did, seems to be better for like wetter, grosser climates that tends to break down grease quicker. Anti-seize for some seems to be the better option, for others, grease. For a number of other people, Teflon tape. Seeing as I'm a bit of a man of science, the only way for me to know for sure is to try it myself. I'm always sort of amazed at the reluctance of people in the bike world to try something different, with like the worry that something, if you change to like anti-seize from grease, that something absolutely catastrophic is going to happen. If you can't tell, tend to not subscribe to those sort of fears. If I want to try something, I give it a whirl. If it sounds like things are going wrong, take it apart and undo what you've done. That, if you're unsure, is how you find out how things work or not. I'm pretty much willing to guarantee this is going to be absolutely fine. I'm not going to notice a difference. Also, while this goes in, there's two things that are like really nice to haves if you're gonna install a threaded external bottom bracket into your threaded bottom bracket shell. Number one being chasing the threads with a tap. That is to just like clean out all the gross debris, dirt, and maybe some imperfections that might have been there from like, that'll help you avoid destroying the threads on your bearing cups themselves. This does come up from time to time. The next is facing the face of your bottom bracket shell. Now, why would you want to do that? That is to make sure that both bearing faces are absolutely flush with one another. That is to say that the spindle goes through perfectly straight and doesn't put any sort of weird axial load on any of the bearings inside your bearing cups. Generally, there's only two of them. That will lead to a nicer turning crank and add to the longevity of your bearings. That is typically why you would face the front of your threaded bottom bracket shell for external bearing use. I did neither of these things because I don't own those tools. Okay, so after quite a bit of research on these particular cranks, I've since learned there are two versions of it. Likely if you've ridden a Cervelo that has had Rotor 3D30s on it, you already know the problem that I'm having. And it has everything to do with this specific lock ring right here that has a spacer built into it, which is specific to the style of bottom bracket that Cervelo was doing using these cranks. I'm pretty sure it's like BB Right or something. There's like a bunch of material on one side, less on the other. It's supposed to be stiffer on the drive side. Needless to say, it is not allowing me to get any sort of purchase on the spindle of this crank. The spacer is too wide, so it actually holds the interface where everything should be touching out here, where the spindle is here. So there's just absolutely no way that with that lock ring on, that this crankset is ever going to go on this bike. Why would you know that unless you were trying to do exactly what I'm doing right now? I'm kind of hopeful that I'll be able to like put it on this thing, without having to do any sort of like major modifications. If I can, great. If not, I will look into being able to like change out some of that stuff. But I guess that just sort of opens up all the options again. Maybe 3 like small but ambitious projects in one night was like more than I could handle. All right, next week I'm going to be out of the country. Tinker Tuesday is going to be kind of weird, and we're definitely not going to be in here. We will actually do like one of those dream build videos that everybody keeps asking me to do. I don't know. Leave in a comment below what you would want to see where I'm not actually working on something, and we just like nerd out about bikes. Okay, sorry for failing.